SEER systems with the first professional grade software center. Reality, thank you. And how did you like software?
Well, we thought it was the right idea at the time. In fact, we called it the future of music synthesis because the idea was it was on a motherboard. It didn't have special hardware, so anybody had access to it, and you could do whatever you wanted. It was software. It was magic. So yeah, at the beginning, it seemed like definitely the future.
How long did that last?
For me personally?
Well, the company.
Well, I don't know how long the company lasted. For me, after about a year, this is kind of an old story, but one day I realized I was never playing with our product Reality. And I always play with my own stuff. That's kind of the whole idea. And so I started asking myself, why am I not playing with this thing? And I realized it was because of, type, click, click, drag, click, click, play a couple notes, look at the screen, type, click, click, drag, play a couple notes, and it wasn't any fun. And I went back to hardware. There's many reasons beyond that, but it was, for me, there was just this one day where I had this epiphany. And
has it improved since then, or do you not even bother looking?
Guiltily, I don't look. I have too much. I like knobs.
Because he's making some of the best synthesizers out there now, hardware synthesizers. Now, Eric went from Roland, from voicing the D50 and many others, and now you're the software guy. Spectrasonics has a wonderful reputation, and we talked about the benefits of software versus hardware. Well, can you tell us what some of those are as far as from a manufacturing point of view?
Sure. Well, that's easy. You don't need a $100 million factory to produce a product. So it was exciting to be able to go from working with Roland, which was a wonderful experience. I mean, I got to be there during that whole period when Sequential and Roland were working together to make MIDI and to introduce MIDI and all these great instruments I got to work on. And I got to see ideas that I had turned into, a lot of those ideas made it into final products. But not everything I wanted to do Roland's a big company and they had their own interests and their own markets, and the cost of products it drives a lot of what kind of products you make. And so the idea that I could do any idea that I could have, and I could make the synthesizer that I wanted in the computer, and be able to distribute that and have lots of people using that. That was really exciting. So yeah, from a development point of view, that was fantastic because it allowed somebody like me that was, I didn't set out to be a businessman. I'm a musician, but I always loved synths, and so it was awesome to be able to make my own synth. And I wouldn't have pursued that if I was going to hardware route.
You said that manufacturers who make a digital hardware synthesizer, the computer chip in there is pretty much obsolete by the time they get the instrument done.
Totally, and the process of making those chips takes at least when I was at Roland, it was taking 3 or 4 years to make basically a little computer, and each one had its own completely different language. And so every time they would do a new one, they'd have to completely start over. And you find out these limitations they would have really late in the process. And so they were almost always underpowered for what we were trying to do. And so that was the other aspect of making, when computers, personal computers got to the point where they're powerful enough, that was really exciting because then the power is just increasing, and we're not tied to this fixed chipset where we're trying to do everything in this little chip, and then that's obsolete, and then the next model comes out, and the next model, every year there's another model that's a little better or slightly different, but and a lot of the more exciting ideas aren't getting explored or tried. Whereas with software, I can make something and build on it and grow it and grow it and grow it. So that aspect of it is really, it's challenging. It has plenty of challenges, but that part of it is very exciting to me.
Those CPUs that you were developing, were they doing digital synthesis?
Yeah. There's like there was that LA chip that was used for the D50, and then there was like a less powerful version of it that was used in the D10 and the D110, and a little less powerful version of that was in the M232, and it was all about cost and how low they can get the price down. So that's part of the problem with hardware to me is that you have to. That part of it is so difficult.
I might mention that problem is with digital synthesizers, and it's not a problem with analog synths.
You stole my thunder, because I was going to remind Eric of what he said. You told me that you envision digital synthesis going into the computers, into the computer realm.
Yeah, exactly.
Hardware
That's exactly right. Yeah. Digital synthesizers, really, digital hardware synthesizers just sort of stop making sense.
So Dave Smith Instruments is okay.
Of course it is. Yeah.
Gerry, you used to work for EView, and you've also gone from hardware to software because now you work with Propeller Head.
Yeah.
How's that?
It was like shipping keyboards to Canada. It was a hard border to get across. It was. I remember going from playing keyboards to playing computers, and I think what happened was they did such a. When I say they, all the controller manufacturers seemed to do such a horrible job at representing what a keyboard player could possibly want to do that. And I just remember one after the other, you would try everything possible, and they seemed to look like keyboards, but actually just be data entry mechanisms to put in, instead of putting in A# and typing it in, you press that button, you knew it was A#, but that's about as groovy as it got. And so I was just really shocked. I think I thought it was a brave new world. I thought it had all the kind of flexibilities you were talking about. Or then, God forbid, you touched a knob that was surface mounted or something, and it just felt like so horrible that you didn't want to touch that knob. I recently didn't buy a little, what do you call those cars? A Mini Cooper? Yeah, everything was really sexy about it, although I would be dead known as if someone owned a Mini Cooper. But when I went to change, I tried the radio, and I thought, this is probably going to kill, And then I went to actually just change the volume, and just touching the knob, I walked right out of that car. I could not stand to be in the car anymore. It was bizarre. So anyway, that's what I thought about the whole thing of trying to graduate or matriculate to playing a computer as a keyboard player was just the horror of it not making sense. And if you touch anything that Dave makes, let's just say, and lift it, work out with it. I mean, it feels good. There's a lubed, whatever you put in the knobs to make the pots to make it feel good. The glue you use, I mean, it just feels great. I just want to be there all day. So it was tactile in a way, right? It wasn't just this sonic thing. It was this tactile experience and a sensory experience that I wasn't getting at all from it. And I think it's somewhat better now, but to be honest, that still is a problem for me. Big problem.
As far as controllers to...
As far as how I feel, what Dave said about not playing with the reality is sort of like with how I feel about wanting to play with it, right? If you play a musical instrument and it gives you such joy that you spend 5 times than what you've allotted for it, I think that someone succeeded in something there. The practice book you're using or the something, right? You're really excited. So it's harder to get that excitement with the interface tools we have right now. But I work for Propeller Heads, and I love Reason, and I'll be on it all day long, and I do have fun with it. But in terms of the keyboard player in me, that feeling of being a synth player, that's the breakdown of the control for me.
I have to put in kudos for Reason because I've been teaching it since 2003 to students ranging from 6th grade through high school. And without that kind of software, it would be impossible to teach classes like that because you'd have to have tons of gear, all the cables to connect everything, storage, someone to keep everything running correctly. So really,
12.
yeah, education. Well, if I can bring the conversation this way to these two MOOCs, I'm talking about interfaces. I want to talk a little bit about alternative controllers and how they're developing. Ed works with Haken Audio on a continuum, and it's
I've
kind
been
of
involved with them since just before 2098. I actually found out, I bought one, I was so impressed with it, and I was the second customer.
wow.
So, we're a big company. We're medium-sized. We're 2 people. Well, an MI.
And well, I want to show the video now.
Sure. Okay. You can. Well, it's 6 minutes. You probably get the idea after 2.
Yeah, we'll watch it for a little bit. So he recommended I invite Ed because Ed is now Roger's favorite violin player, even though he doesn't play violin. So how much practice does it take to play something like that?
Well, it's surprisingly difficult instrument to play because if you approach it as, I mainly approach it as a monophonic instrument because to keep your head split and keep two separate things in tune just from finger position, it's really hard. Really switching back and forth. We built into the continuum mechanisms that make it easier to play into. Like there's rounding mechanisms either through initial touch or through a rounding thing where it just drifts at a particular speed to a particular scale, either temperament or adjust tuning. But what I found was when I played that way, I got sloppy finger memory. And it was better to just force yourself to go through this horrible, like someone who's, has a child that's learning violin, you have to go through that torture until they're in their teens and they're actually playing well. So that particular sound is an internal sound in the continuum. So I agree with Dave's assessment of just tactileness of knobs. In the continuum's case, it's a plane surface, and that it's that tactile nature that I find amazing. We have, our fingers are so sensitive, and I'd grown up playing piano and playing oboe, and then really heavily getting into synthesizers, and owning a ton of them and evolving through them. But I always felt like I was operating a bank of switches. And so I'd always play analog synths, and I'd always be turning the knobs, And the oboe chops just sort of fell away as I got into my work. I couldn't get the embouchure up. And then I saw this opportunity, and it was amazing. I mean, the remuneration is not that great, but just in terms of the musical thing, it's absolutely amazing. So the tactileness comes from the continuum. The sounds come from the sharp that we haven't changed in 7 years or something. We're really waiting for a order of magnitude of power shift before we make a jump. But it's amazing, you know, if you keep things integrated in a single DSP, as this machine does, all its brain and sound generation is from that single sharp. It's amazing the things that you can dig out of it. For instance, very limited RAM that's available. So this thing was a granular synthesis technique, and that whole sound comes from 100 milliseconds of E flat from a viola. So it's a very selective, processed and EQ'd timbre, attack and sustain thing. So it's the kind of thing that if I didn't have that limitation, if we just said we had endless amounts of RAM, and we would sort of treat it like a traditional sampler, we would have never discovered this particular timbre. And within the synth engine that we built into the continuum, we have a number of different synthesis techniques. It's the screenshot that you saw, which was that sort of shows the. I don't know if you can roll it back. Yeah, there. So that there is the matrix. So I base that on the idea of like the EMS synthesizers with their pin matrices. So we have on the side is sources, and on the top is destinations. And so you just make connections between oscillators and physical modeling, like filter banks and LFOs and that sort of stuff. But instead of just dropping a pin in, you drop in a formula. And the formula is a representation of your finger position in X, Y, and Z, and also if your finger state is the gate logic of your finger, and also shape generators, which act as LFOs. And so each one of them is independent. So it's a very, very dynamic matrix. And that's the continuum.
And X, Y, Z being?
Yeah, X would be, normally would be pitch. Yeah, and then Y would be, you'd map it to something like a timbre control or something, and then Z would be pressure.
So let's, before I jump off of that, I want you to see where Ed came from.
Brought the point with this company that, if your system is making you frustrated, like, there's a wonderful possibilities. There's all these possibilities that you can go into, but if it's too frustrating to get there, you just drop it. There's just too many things. Like for me in my studio, ergonomics is a huge thing. I'll just spend time just micro changing angles because I don't want to, essentially when I get into the creative flow, I don't want to be interrupted.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, and with this sort of playing instrument, is you can actually get a lot of different mood changes from the same sound. One of my favorite sounds that I programmed on that was a very simple, relatively simple synthesis, subtractive synthesis, which was like a Troutonium. So it had some sawtooth oscillators and then a couple of forming filters. The band has forming filters, but it's just amazing how expressive it is. And you look at a theremin, it's very, very basic architecture and just so expressive.
What it was getting to was, and you talk about ergonomics, Ed. This is the beast.
That's how I satisfy my knock quest.
I keep seeing that repeated on Facebook. People keep sharing that around. What is this?
Currently, this is my studio, and I converted my garage, and the thing is so big that we brought it in a truck in the back, and I put it in before the window went in where the garage door was. So now it can't go out unless I disassemble it. So I'm not worried about getting stolen. Yeah, that's right.
Is that a surge?
Yep.
It is, it's all Serge.
So I want to transition Drew into your performance.
I guess in the interest of full disclosure, I'm currently working for Dave up here.
Making some really nice sounds.
Thank you, sir.
And the timbers.
As a composer, I just basic cable cartoons mostly, working on Bravest Warriors. I'm probably most famous for Eon Flux on MTV, which was very hardware heavy. I have to say, I come down heavily on the side of user interface first, and I'm less concerned about whether or not something is done on a computer, an iPad, or an analog synthesizer, as long as that interface is something you can react with. Animo, of course, I'm biased because I was involved with it. Is very intuitive, easy to interact with. We'll sometimes fly in tracks from that thing as I'm working on the cue. Most of us in our daily job have to use sampling for, underscore. I'm sure Ana Batia over there can tell you all about that. You got the deadline and you really don't have time to pull out the cables and patch up something.
Yeah, but I hate samplers. I'd rather use all the
Well, you still have a mini Moog and you still have an ARC-2600 in your setup for a reason.
This is Edmund Batia, right here.
Famous composer, working on CBS right now.
Oh, come on.
We'll point you out.
Stand up. Come on.
Take a round of applause.
There's a whole bunch of us composers out here. So
Yeah, but nobody else did Interstellar Suite.
I'm going Robert Rich is over there. Anyway. So the debate, hardware versus software, my first iPad that was used for developing or being involved in the development of Animo failed after 2 years. So what does that tell you about the longevity of software? Ditto with, I have things, I'm stuck at Snow Leopard because I have plugins that I can't take to Mavericks. There we go. I hear you're paying, brother. Let's get to, should we talk about Sample Cell and what happened back in the jump from OS 9 to 10 and all that stuff. So, I have to thank Mark as well here because if it weren't for his vintage synthesizer book, I wouldn't have stocked up on a whole bunch of vintage synths back in the 90s. Which paid for my kids' college.
And while we're all cross-referencing each other, Michael Boddicker just walked in the room.
There he is. Anyway, so this thing he's going to show is people have been posting touch panel videos on YouTube and all that. I thought, okay, I've got one. I really should do something. So I spent, I think it was 3 or 4 days programming the mod cam with Serge and having it really expressive entry, doing something very different than what he's doing with his. I'm sure you've got videos of your Serge system online as well and all that. But
I'm pretty closeted.
anyway.
So this is using the Surge TKB.
Yeah.
Amazing touch control.
It's a lot of fun to play with. We were just kidding, it's in pause. No, it's going.
It has touch plates, which was one of the earliest alternative controllers, if you will.
I spent a lot of time on these things at CalArts on the Neumann systems there, so it seemed like a nice thing to jump to. The other thing about that touch plate is sometimes to get the right intonation out of it, you actually have to hold down 2 keys. And you can't see the picture, but I actually put little sticky stars around, if I wanted to see. I have to push down these 2 keys and get there. The frequency shifter is about to be my pitch bend. The thing was moody too. If I worked on a different day, wearing socks, not wearing socks.
It becomes a static electricity.
Not just static, but humidity and conductivity and Serge and Mod Can Gang. So that's an all analog thing, and then here's an all iPad thing. As we were kind of getting.
Sit down.
No. This was done entirely on the iPad with analog. That, okay.
Ralph Gershon is also here.
Anyway, you get the idea that, I mean, it's something that's similar to the continuum on a much, much smaller scale. That you have, direct gestural control, you can do vibrato with your fingers, you can do polyphonic connected lines, and I think that's something that is very difficult to do on a traditional keyboard, in a way where it doesn't really know where your voicing is going, and on that you can play. They had an April Fool's joke years ago, mode thing that was the polyphonic theremin, but you can actually do it on analog.
Changing the subject back to Eric. How many of you remember seeing this a couple of years ago? The OMG one. Eric, can you tell us a little about this?
Sure. Although I know I'm sort of up here representing software, my favorite, I love hardware systems. You will never part my CS80 from me ever. And I use lots of hardware. So this whole idea, I totally get it. I totally get like what the problems are with software and what's difficult about the challenge of performing with a computer. And one of the worst things of all, anybody that's ever tried performing with a laptop is when an audience member asks you why you're checking your email. I'm creating, this is my art, this is what I do. And so it's the biggest drag about the whole thing is there's no visual vibe to it, there's not the hands-on control, you don't have that sense of interactivity, and it doesn't look very cool either. So I thought, well, it would be awesome to combine these worlds, because that's really, I don't think any of us up here are really arguing for one way or the other. It really is both. There's advantages to both things. And so I modified a little fatty and worked with a builder friend of mine, a craftsman, and we put two iPads, two iPods in the front, and a second keyboard. And on the inside of the OMG is a Mac Mini. And so it has, you can run any software on it, and you can run any iPad app, and it's an analog synth, and all of the controls, all the analog knobs and everything are all routed to Omnisphere. So you can select patches, and you can program it exactly the way you would program a mini mode or the little fatty or any of those kinds of things. So and it works two-way also. So and that's what it's like when you open it. You can see, and so on the inside that's where the Mac Mini is housed. So it was kind of an experiment to make it, and we ended up giving it away in a contest for the Bob Moog Foundation. And part of it was an experiment to see, because I wanted something for myself to play live, so I could play the instruments that I'm making, just like Dave wants to be able to play his instruments. I want to be able to play mine live too. Was to solve that problem. But one of the things about that was it ended up being really heavy. That's the thing you don't really get from the picture. So it was killing me when I would bring it to gigs. And so after I gave away the first one, which was kind of a prototype, I made another one for myself, which I've actually never announced or anything. So you guys are the first to get to see it. And this is the OMG2. So it's a mini version of it. And it's very lightweight, and it has the same Mac Mini inside, and all the networking and the hubs and all the crap you need, to get computers to work. It's all inside. And then you have the iPads, and then you also have built-in mixing on it, so I can mix all the signals. With the OMG1, I needed a separate mixer. So the mixer's built in, and it's on the right. And I separated the mode and control part of it. So I used a Slim Fatty, and so that I don't always need to have the knobs and hands-on control. So sometimes I'll bring that, and sometimes I won't. But it's very lightweight now, so I can just put it over my shoulder, and I can plug in larger keyboards. I'm planning on getting a Continuum. I'm going to plug that into the side, and I can expand it however I want. But that's basically my laptop. But it doesn't look like a laptop. It looks like a very cool keyboard with solid ebony sides and beautiful curly maple wood and all that kind of thing. So
is this using a Thunderbolt Mac internally, or?
Yeah.
And what did you use for the audio interface?
I just used the built-in audio. It sounds great.
Oh, okay.
For live, it sounds wonderful. The problem with using it live is the connector, because the connector is so flimsy, and if it breaks on a laptop, the whole motherboard has to be replaced. So that's one of the really bad parts about using a laptop live. But as far as compatibility and reliability, the built-in audio it sounds great. It sounds fine, especially live.
And when's this going in production? When can I have it?
Yeah, not going in production.
I'll trade you.
Yeah, definitely. People are always interested in it. No, those are, this is what I showed you.
Herbie
Hancock.
Herbie Hancock.
And these are Korg micro keys. So these have mini keyboards. And so this is something I'm always interested in, is trying to figure out how to solve these problems between using computers, awesome stuff that you can do with computers, but bridging that gap between what's great about an analog synth and trying to do that. For me, it's been fun to do just as a personal project, because making a keyboard like this commercially would be insanely expensive. I think the parts were $8,000. So not to mention the year of custom labor and everything. It's a really fun instrument. And when I play live, the opposite happens now. It's everybody wants to know about what that is, and it's a cool thing to play, and it's fun. And it's an interesting thing too, because having two keyboards that can do completely independent things. I can play any of the iPads from either keyboard. I can play several Omnispheres from either keyboard, or whatever I want. And being able to have two synths at the same time in a very small form factor is really cool. I mean, it's like what's great about an organ, is being able to have several things going. And it's surprising to me that synth manufacturers haven't really embraced that.
Stock up on spare iPads, though they fail.
Yes, right. Yeah. But that way, also, you have a dedicated having a dedicated computer for live performance. It makes all the difference, because then you're not dealing with stuff getting out of sync and compatibility, and suddenly I can't use this anymore. It worked at the last gig, it'll work at the next gig. So that's my current attempt at combining these worlds.
Have you seen online people have been posting links on Facebook to, I think he's in Germany, a guy who's been making sort of hardened versions of Diva and...
right, yeah. There's other people doing this kind of stuff too.
I think that's what we were all feeling. It's like we love this stuff, but we wanted this,
Absolutely. But at the moment, there's really not a way to do it commercially and have it be, I think I had somebody look at the OMG one, actually not somebody, a lot of people, and they looked at it and said, man, I would totally pay $600 for that. And hence the problem.
Who was it said they wouldn't give up on the CS80?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I've restored 3 of them. I'm stupid enough to be a composer and a guy who works on them, but when yours breaks, this is an argument against hardware. These things are as miserable as an old Italian sports car to work on.
40-year-old.
What? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's a difference.
One of them, two of them were from a garage in New Mexico, and he had started to take the thing apart. He said, well, you know, if you fix them up, you can keep one. I said, okay. What shape are they in? One of them had all the Tolex ripped off, the side wood bits taken off of it. Some of the wires were broken. Took a while to figure out which ones. They're both working. They're in downtown LA now, but still. And then putting the MIDI kit into it is an absolute nightmare. Yours has one, but you have to solder on a custom chip that no longer exists anyway. Anyway, that's that stupidity.
I'll just take this second to announce I have a new book that just is being published. It's called The Synthesizer. And it's a big, thick book. In magazine language, they say it has a big thud factor. Because it has over 400 pages. It took me 7 years to do it. I tried to get some for sale here, but they're not available yet. But the publisher, Oxford University Press, sent me a bunch of flyers. So you're welcome after we're done to come and pick these up. You'll get a little discount, and you can buy it directly from. Some of you don't need to buy them because some of you help me with this, so you do not need to buy them. But anyway, they're up here. What I was looking for was another picture of the CS80 that Drew took apart. No, this was not the one you took. This is a picture.
Oh, that's Kent Small. He's just like John Limesider, one of the holy people you call down and like, I'm stuck on fixing this. You know, oh yeah, that's the broken wire right behind the keyboard. Kent Small takes them all the way down and replaces Tolex and everything. It's really scary to see what he does to them. The one above, that's the ruined one that I got out of, those are the two side by side. The one on the right was actually in pretty okay condition. Just needed every capacitor and all the CMOS parts replaced. Big job. The one on the left was an absolute nightmare to get working again, but it had the good oscillators in it that held tune, so it was worth fixing.
I think it's amazing how two CS80s can make a grand piano look so insignificant. And on the right here is the Arturia CS80, which is a very nice,
it's a soft sound.
It is very lightweight. Yes, definitely. I'd like to talk about programmability since Dave is here. He started it all with the Prophet 5. I find it quite interesting that a number of manufacturers have gone back and started making non-programmable synthesizers. Marcus Brownlee, we should tell that story that he was. Who was he telling that to? He got the speakers out and put a PIA sequencer in one of the spaces of the speaker. He said it never worked right. I said, well, it's a PIA. How many put PIA kits together?
They're still working.
Yeah, and they're still making new modules.
Well, I mean, once I do it, they still work.
Well, you did it right. You know what you're doing. So that's an old one. Here's a new one. The mini brood. I don't have the micro brood in here yet, but the mini brood is not programmable. I've got to check with the Arturia guys because I found a way to get a stuck note with the only oscillator. So I had to find out if I got a bum micro or mini brood or if that's suffered by all of them. The depth for dark energy. Yeah, this is non-programmable and also patchable. Dieter Deffer, I credit him with having a lot to do with the modular synthesizer industry coming back so strong. Came up with his own format. We'll talk about that in a minute. Oh, old EML. George Mattson remembers this one.
It would take a while.
George Mattson used to work for EML. Come on, stand up. Stand up. And he has the biggest EML synthesizer in the world, right? Probably. To see him if you want to buy it. The monopoly. Okay, is this the new or the old MS-20?
Good for dust.
This is actually the original. Oh, that old guy. This is my mini mode. I have to admit, I bought it in 1976 and I sold it a few years ago to buy some modular stuff. I know. We got a lot of good out of it. So, at one point, Moog Music made a non-programmable mini mode Voyager, the old school. I think it's gone out of production, but they could tell that people like the non-programmable aspect. Another oldie, the Oscar from England. Synthicon. Niall Steiner's synthesizer. No, that's right. Niall Steiner.
The Boomstar.
Okay, new from Studio Electronics is the Boomstar series. They have 4 models. They have 6 models.
Yes. They've just announced 2 new ones, CS80 filter and Cord 700 filter.
No.
Sorry.
Each one has a different kind of filter in it from vintage instruments. The 4075 was the ARP filter. The 5069 was the Moog ladder filter. And Tom O'Brien's SEM in the Boomstar. So why would you want something not to be programmable? Anybody? Go ahead, Gerry.
Well, in addition to not liking to be the keyboard player who arrives in 10 trips from the car, watching the trombonist walk in, saunteringly, but I actually appreciate something about when that part comes in, that's the trombone, and that trombonist can make it sound all kinds of ways and make me feel all kinds of ways, but there's a center there to what he's doing, or she's doing, that I really appreciate. I actually saw a keyboard player who did this a year ago at that place, Dresden, in Los Olivos. The same 2 people have been playing there for 20 years, and the woman that plays piano has something on the lid of the piano. Looks like a little synth or something. It has one sound. It has one sound with a little kind of thing you can make it a little bit more like that or less like that. And when that voice comes in, I just associate it with a personality, a center, a part, a musical part. Something about it just really attractive to me. And when I played before we had programmable synths, I think that's exactly what I would do before the gig, is get some center of something that I think I wanted for most of the sound of the band I was playing with. And then you can just simply vary from that, but you're never that far from that. You're not everything, you're that, and you kind of leave it there. And then the guy actually knows how to mix you too into the band sound, because the guitarist actually sounds like the guitar. So there's something I think for me that was really meaningful about it. And I got just as bewitched as everyone when the programmability started, because after all, then I could be more things than I needed or wanted to be. But it was wonderful to go to that song and have that sound. But I did think there was also something missing.
You sort of have to do that with, if you're using modulars on TV shows, you kind of have to program the whole thing up for one paradigm at the beginning of the TV season. Because you're not going to touch it again except maybe to turn the knobs, or it's just not practical to, okay, I'm going to reprogram this, it'll take 3 days. Oh, when is it due?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Personally, with the mini mode, I felt like the interaction with the instrument, with the knobs, and learning how to actually play the instrument. To me, I kind of compare it with a guitar player, like an acoustic guitar player holds the instrument, and it's a very one-on-one relationship. So that's how it went to me. I could never afford Prophet 5 when they were due, so I never got that lucky.
I think it's really important to be able to have instruments in your. I recommend it to everybody that they should have an instrument that's non-programmable, especially if they're using software, because there's something, your brain does something different when you have to create something and it's going to be gone, and it forces you. It's like, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with that sound? And there's something very special as a synthesis when you make a sound especially for this piece of music, and it's not going to be the same way the next day, and it was made just for that. And that's like, it's a really beautiful thing, and a lot of younger guys don't. I think they're discovering that, and I think that's what's exciting about these new crop of non-programmable synths, and that they're successful. I remember when I saw the mini group, that was like one of the big questions, is like, what are all the preset kids going to do? They're going to have to dive in, but people have embraced it, and I think it's fantastic, because when they understand synthesis, then they'll understand what I do, my product, a lot better too. You know?
Yeah.
Well, there's something appealing about their limited architecture too. That, basically you can fit that entire thing in your head. It's like whenever I play my Voyager, I don't use the presets. I always just default, because I know how to navigate that structure. I know where to get there, and it's always sounding a little bit different every single time.
Yeah, you have to remember that these are all people who actually know how to use synthesizers. The real problem with non-programmables is they don't make sound in many cases. And it started back with the mini mode. You go into a music store, and it didn't make sound unless the customer actually knew how to get the sound out of it. Because there were so many knobs, and if it's turned this way, there's no sound. And that's a real problem. It's good for people to be able to figure that out and to know it. I mean, anything that teaches people synthesis is fine with me. But the real reason, I think, from a designer and manufacturer's point of view, that there's so many of them is because it's cheaper and it's real easy to design. Because voices don't have to match. A program doesn't have to sound the same on every single instrument you make. You can go anybody in here can go on Google and find some circuits and throw together a monophonic, non-programmable synth. I mean, it's kind of funny that companies like Arturia, who've been telling us for years that their software sounds just like analog, is now making analog synths. It's not that hard, because the pot just has to connect right to the circuitry, and something has to happen. And at the next one, if it's a little different, that's actually kind of cool that it's different. But if you have programs, it has to be the same, because otherwise it'll sound wacky. So there's a lot of reasons. There's hundreds of companies making monophonic analog synths.
Can I ask you something about the Prophet 5? The rumor about so many of them, when they came back for repair, they had the factory sounds on them. Was that?
Oh yeah. And that still happens now. Some people would tell you that they put the factory presets in them, so when it came to the factory, we wouldn't steal them. So there was some lack of sound.
Right.
But actually, that reminds me of when you're talking about using the unprogrammable units for a specific sound. There's a story of a very famous British band that had a number of mini modes in their studio, and somebody asked, well, why do we have so many of them? And they said, well, when they got a particular sound on it, they put duct tape over all the knobs on the mini mode so that it always sounded the same way, and then they'd buy a new mini mode.
Yes.
So I've heard that.
Do you know who that was? Do you know who that was? Go ahead.
Pink Floyd.
Was it? Okay.
But the point being, if that's what it takes, if it was programmable, it's like I was going to ask you after you had that great sound on the big modular, did you save the preset?
I don't think I would have been able to get it back if I took pictures. It just
And modern day, like some of the parts of Prophet 12, putting that quick pitch, the modulation matrix in that thing is so deep, and it runs at audio rates that you can do X%, pick your number of what you can do on a modular synth, and when you're done, you hit record, and then it's there the next day exactly how you saved it, and you can still go in and grab that one knob that always does the same thing day to day, and change it, and if you like the new one, you save that. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. I understand what you're saying about the personality of this one sound, but you can have two.
Yeah.
I think they both exist side by side. Your user interface invites people to go up and play with it.
Exactly, yeah.
Maybe they store it, maybe they don't. Maybe they say, I'm going to mess with this in real time, and then that's recorded off to a digital audio workstation, and then it's that.
It's got to be fun, and that's, I think, the resurgence of analog synthesis is all about being fun again, playing an instrument. We went through that dark ages of everything digital and no panels, and people calling musical instruments workstations. Work, you know. If I don't smile at least every couple of minutes playing an instrument, then what's the point? It's all about having fun and enjoying it as a musician with your instrument and having a relationship. And that's another one of the things I don't get out of software. I just don't feel the connection of a drag down menu versus a knob that will always be the same knob. And 10 years you go to the same knob, does the same thing. Whereas if you buy, like you said, a controller problem. Controller, nice row of knobs, might have lights, but every time you use it, it does something different because it's on a different program. And there's no logical sense of signal flow or how it actually integrates into it. I mean, it's all known problems, but it's just a different way of looking at it.
Back 1 second to the Minimo tape down knobs thing. I heard it was Pink Floyd, but one time I heard Keith Emerson tell an audience that it was Rick Wakeman who did that.
So maybe none of them did it. It's an urban tale.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, some of the more innovative software that's coming out has an extraordinarily interesting, new, innovative user interface. You know, things like Iris are very gestural because they throw away the conventions of, okay, I'm going to use a mouse to control a slider, which is akin to trying to drive an 18-wheeler with a joystick. It's not really all that intuitive or fun, but they've got things. It's sort of like, are you familiar with the Persing app on the iPad? You can just sit there and draw with your finger. You want to filter, you draw what you want. And the same thing is true of Iris. You can just gesturally draw what kind of sound you want. Maybe start with the raw material. It could be anything you fly into it, but then it's very immediate, very quick, very sculptural. So it's valid for that side of things, and as opposed to something that has a fixed architecture. It's okay. I know this is going to be this subset of sounds that I might need for that atmosphere or whatever. I think they're both valid.
Yeah, one of the challenges is I think as the factory libraries grow. It started with 32, 40, yeah, 40, and now Omnisphere has 10,000. And when you have 10,000, when you get up to that range, all sorts of new problems come in because people that one of the things that we face is that there's so many sounds, and the browsing becomes such a big part of finding what the capabilities are, that people tend to, hardcore synthesis sometimes don't realize what the instrument is capable of as far as making their own sounds, because they're browsing so much. So like one of the things we're working on now is we want to have it so that somebody can have a different workflow where Omnisphere will come up blank. And so you can alternatively choose to not see any of the sounds and just look at your own sounds only. And that would be a completely different workflow because it would force you into, okay, I'm going to have a different workflow. Because it's wonderful to have access to so many sounds and all of that, but it's a double-edged sword. It uses a different part of your brain. You're not interacting with it in the same way. And so it's not something we necessarily intended to happen, but it's sort of a consequence of just giving people so many options and so many things. It makes them not be connected to the instrument the same way. And so that connection is what we're all talking about. It's like incredibly important to be connected to the synthesizer. Otherwise, you get bored with music, and you get bored with your instrument, and it becomes a workstation. Yeah, that's not a good thing.
Well, it's nice to have that option when you're dealing with other factors like time and purpose.
Yeah,
what you're doing with the music, how much time you have, and invariably, if you're
in post work like I'm doing, it's about deadlines. So being a good librarian, with your 10,000 sounds is actually just as important to be able to grab through and filter and do that sort of thing. But when you have time, it is nice to have the clean slate. And I love starting with my first preset empty, which just says, well, here's my white canvas, and now it's time to explore. And I'll always end up someplace different than where I thought it was going to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the beauty of templates. I thought it was a pretty interesting solution when you have that most arcane of synthesis, of the FM synthesis, to have thousands of starting places and then 4 controllers that somehow change within that. It's almost as if the more difficult the system is to understand, control, and get results from that you think you want prescriptively according to what you hear. So then 10,000 is okay. I can get my different centers, and then I can have just that limited group of controls that help me steer that around, sometimes in radical ways, right? A lot of times in just little ways. And I never thought I would say that about the DS at all. That was attractive in that solution of providing the control with the programmability, since they had to.
I want to just read a little bit of an email from somebody. Mark, you wrote vintage synthesizers. So, by now we've all appeased our inner 20-year-olds. I still want to play with the Technos XL. Does anybody remember the Technos XL?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I did. I'll show it to you in a second. Anyway, what would your future dream synth be? Simple, complex, rude, clean, polyphonic, or just a map? I have lots of ideas, but I don't want to live in a vacuum. I want other opinions. Who would write that? So yeah, I was going to show the Technos because this thing was just lights. This one down here to the lower right is the controller. He's here? Right back there. He's the one that owns it? Oh. No. On the right. That's the Calabrio. Sorry.
And that was the interface for it. It had a 19-inch rack.
Yes.
That it tied into.
And it was a resynthesizer.
Yeah, additive synthesis, and it would do a limited amount of resynthesis.
A limited amount?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
It just suffered from a lot of startup costs, and at a certain point, I owned one at one point, ended up donating it to the university I graduated from. It just musically wasn't very useful, and the idea there was to have this tactile surface, and it would light up, and it could be different things. It could be volume envelopes or harmonics of signs. You could just drag your finger over it, and it had these little touch-sensitive, not LEDs, I don't know exactly what they were. And then it had an audio input, and you could feed sound into it, and it would resynthesize it. But it was fairly quick doing that, but the real problem was just the resolution was poor, and it just didn't sound like it. It just sounded bad. It was it's like you had access to well, it didn't sound bad to me, and I just couldn't find anything musically. I didn't really tie into it, and unfortunately, it suffered from just underfunding, like a lot of projects would, and then at one point, I just felt disheartened about owning the thing. It was a beautiful thing to be in front of. It just what sonically came out of it wasn't very gratifying.
So with resynthesis, you would be able to take a sample of something with vibrato.
It was just so low resolution and so few options that basically you tie yourself to things that were harmonically related. It couldn't There just wasn't enough resolution to do something. A symbol would just throw it right off.
Okay. But I mean, resynthesis in general is with the intent, if you take a sample with vibrato and play it at a different pitch, that the vibrato frequency would change.
If you had the sophisticated tools, you could do that set of things, things like on a Kima system that I have, where you can resynthesize something and then extract harmonic information, or even out the amplitude be all even or the pitch be even. And this one, it just was a bit of an unrealized dream. One of the engineers contacted a group of us shortly after, a year or so after the company was failing, and just wondered if we were interested in funding to get the MIDI spec up, so at least it would work fully. But I just cut my losses with that.
Wasn't it the price of a small house in Ontario?
I don't want to be remembered.
Well, this was a time period where just about every year there was a new additive synthesis engine or product that came into either AES or NAMM, and it would be two guys that were engineers who realized that we read Fourier's theory that, okay, we can sideways together and make any sound. And they made a synthesizer that did that, and they never sounded very good, and they'd be gone, and then next year there would be another one. And this was one of many in that series of additive synthesizers that came and went.
Yeah.
Kudos for trying the interface. That was really, and additive synthesis, like sort of the digital revolution, was really beguiling. And it was the thing that got Lippold talking, the inventor of it, continued interested. And he thought that was the be-all, end-all, where you could just, essentially take your sounds and put them into a three-dimensional or four-dimensional space and be able to morph between them. But in actual fact, there's no additive. We find it's a surprisingly limited palette.
More, not like vector synthesis. Probably yes.
That's limited also, but it has its own sound. It's really good and unique. Nothing wrong necessarily with being limited.
I just looked up Kima, symbolic sounds Kima, because you mentioned it, Ed. And funny that Dave is pictured across from it. But Drew once had a kind of funny response about things like Kima, and you had one, yeah. You have one? Yeah, tell us. Somebody gave you a Kima? Because you told me that you didn't want to go there. You thought you would never leave your studio.
Well, some things are monk work. A friend of Tom Oberheim's gave me his system. He was just done with it and ready to move on. And it's really basic, very bottom of the line system. I spent a little bit of time with that, and then I spent some time with medicine. And every time I fire that up, I learn something new. And what I found was that I liked the interface and the immediacy of medicine far more than, the Kima came with a book about doing what looked like TRS-80 programming, and, okay, not in this lifetime. I have to choose my battles,
Okay, interesting. By the way, Drew gave me some graphics and some sounds that he did with Metasynth on the website that goes with my book, the companion website. But any other comments about where we might be going with synthesizers?
Everywhere. Software, it's convenient, it's portable, it's great. If you want, a dedicated instrument that always does the same thing, and you want an analog or digital, it's all there. I mean, nothing's better than, it's just musician preference, really. So it's just going to continue into the future. I think it's going to be analog, it'll be digital, it'll be software.
I'd like to see certain things left off as, okay, we need that to be just a permanent part of our lexicon. Guitarists have it good. They've got the Strat, they've got the Les Paul. Those will be made forever. We will always need the mini mode. We will always need a poly synth of some sort, whether it's a hybrid or a pure analog thing or something like that.
Well, the nice thing now is I think that basic subtractive synthesis has passed the test of time.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Two oscillators, filter, VCA. Everybody knows how to go out to any synthesizer that's attractive, and turn the cutoff, you know what it's going to sound like. You turn the resonance, you know what it's going to sound like. It's been around for 50 years. It's available in hardware and analog. It's available in hardware and digital. It's available in lots of software, and it's just something that really it's easy to relate to. And I think it has passed the test of time.
Yeah, definitely, and it's become part of the vocabulary. Yeah. So it's an evolution, an ever expanding vocabulary. But we always want to say, I've always got that piano. They didn't stop making them. Damn it, that's good.
It's like in about 90 or 91 here at NAMM, somebody came out with a whole group of new sounds for this clavier, all the orchestral sounds, and they had it set up in a booth over in a suite in Marriott, and playing all these marvelous orchestra sounds. And they also had drums set up and guitar and bass, and so after they were done with the demonstration, they started jamming. And of course, the first thing the guy loaded in his synclavier were Hammond B3 sounds and whirly sounds and this $250,000 instrument playing.
I do kind of think that there's potential for the resynthesis stuff in the future, but I think that it actually has a long way to go. But the theory, with enough computer power, the theory, I think it'll pay off at some point.
Well, that's your new processor every year thing.
Well, no, I mean, just personal computers. When personal computers start to get a lot faster than they are.
Yeah.
And right now we're in kind of a funny holding period because everything's about mobile. So everything's actually gotten slower.
Well, it's also the OSs have gotten thicker and chunkier.
Right, and all that kind of stuff. So computers haven't really been getting like twice as fast every year. But I think that'll happen again at some point.
Or you can make your own OS.
Yeah, right.
Well, they did something like that for the Hartman Neuron was actually a Celeron PC.
Right.
And all Linux and very off-the-shelf component.
Right.
And a very nice case.
Yeah. But I think that to get the kind of really being able to extract all the parts of the sound and represent, the air in the recordings and the kind of like a really great ambient recording, that's very difficult to resynthesize with sine waves. Very difficult. And when I,
Necessary?
well, being able to pull all of that apart and create new sounds from that is very interesting. Yeah, not just recreating, but you can already do that.
And then the trick is, what do you do with that information? You
Right.
have realms of information.
How do you control it?
How do you control
Exactly,
it?
yeah.
What we're finding right now with the continuum, I find the most exciting thing we're dealing with is these biquad filter banks of physical modeling. And so they're essentially feedback systems, and they can surprisingly start to go places that are hard to control. So if you look at the physical modeling, I used to own a Yamaha DL1, which was an early one, and some of the sounds worked quite well, and the programmers who worked on it, they just said, well, things that should work just didn't, and they were surprised what wouldn't happen. And
Right.
I'm finding the same thing programming in the continuum, but sonically, it's efficient and exciting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but, I think the
But
DSPs are there now.
Ultimately, it's pretty limited. It's just like another one of those.
It does go to a certain thing, yeah.
Yeah.
But when you talk about, if you look at an additive system where you just say you want to go from X to Y, and you want to work along that line and deal with that data, there's so many difficult ways to do that. Whereas in the modeling system, you can go from X to Y kind of efficiently. And sometimes it doesn't go in exactly a linear fashion, which is surprising.
Yeah, I think that's what I like the most about that, is the happy accidents and the little surprise, the artifacts, the interesting artifacts you find. In fact, last night, I found another swizzle stick in my search for the ultimate swizzle stick that I put between my teeth, and when I go boing with it, how I feel at that point. And when you change your mouth, the format of your mouth, and how that makes you feel, and then you open your mouth a little and sound starts to come out. So I have a bag full of swizzle sticks now, and I'm getting ready to make a presentation about this. But anyway, just physical modeling wise, that's the future for me. Yeah.
We have a microphone back there. If anybody wants to ask this group a question, Don? Yeah, Don. Don Lewis.
This is really great to see you guys up there, because I know most of you. And I was thinking about a period of time around '83 when the DX7 came out, and that was FM visual synthesis. And what do you think about that? Because we've been talking mostly about additive and subtractive synthesis. And I remember going to Stanford back in '72 when John Chowning was formulating that. And the sounds that I heard coming out of that mainframe computer at Stanford were just miraculous. And I think one other thing besides just the FM is that we didn't talk about psychoacoustics, which I heard. I think we should have more control over that than we do. And when we are doing the kinds of complex things, most of the sound engineers don't understand what we do at the beginning. And so if there was more, I think, emphasis in where does the sound go in the field, I think someone pointed that out, because it can really get complex. It's not like an acoustic instrument. You have to build your own acoustics with that. So, any comments?
I'd like to comment on the DX7. I think it was the death of the user interface for about a decade.
And that was promo.
As far as psychoacoustics, I think we've gotten to a point now where our systems are very modular. If we're working in a digital audio workstation, you might work with a synth plugin or an actual synth that's very dry, and then use something that has impulse responses within that workstation, if I understood the question correctly. Anyone else want?
Well, psychoacoustics, I mean, I think of when you have the best oboe sound in the world, so much time and bandwidth and quality, and then you play organ licks, and that just turns into the worst oboe sound in the world, or vice versa. And when you mentioned the DX stuff, I'm seeing Sal Galena with his controller. And if you ever tried playing any of the sounds that he made sound so amazing by playing a keyboard note and holding it, you would just turn away and run out the door. But when Sal played them, they sounded incredible. Like that sound must have so much juice in it. And actually the only thing that gave it the juice was his control of it. You know, that if you just pressed that key, it was just really unremarkable. But that, I think that FM, maybe more so than subtractive synthesis, I think there's just more things to drive within the sound to really transform its guts, kind of. And you're trapped a little bit with subtractive and certainly with sampling to rip a gut out sometimes. Maybe not always, Dave, but sometimes. But with FM, I just remember hearing the sound of inside out, like I've just been turned inside out by a control.
Well, if you separate DX7 from FM, because it is two different things, FM does show up. Like Prophet 12 has FM, accurate FM you can do on it, and then run it through subtractive filters. So FM itself, I think there's a lot of synths that have it included as as a feature. So it hasn't gone away. On the other hand, if you look at the marketplace for used DX7s compared to a used analog instrument, you see what the perception is of the instrument now. It's there's 250,000 of them out there. It's the second most popular synth ever made. I think the M1 was more, but and you just never ever see them. But an old analog synth, they're costing almost as much as they did then.
And unfortunately for the DX7, the plug-in version of it is much better than the original.
That's true.
FM8 is fantastic. Yeah. John Lenville is the plug-in guru. He does a lot of FM programming.
A lot of FM.
And the
idea of combining using FM as a technique with other things like FM as subtractive synth, or and honestly, you can use FM on sample sounds, and that's really useful. But it seems to be better in combination with other things than by itself. FM8 is probably the best example of a really good synthesizer that's pure. Yes, sir.
Yeah. I more have a comment than a question, and it's an observation. I teach a lot of young people audio engineering and synthesis, and a lot of kids, they come in with their laptops and everything software. And one of the things that it took me a while to realize and understand is because of our generation having hardware and outboard gear and aux ends and patch bays and patches and so on. The kids today are really baffled by signal flow. And so one of the things that I have to start out with is a really good understanding of something we take for granted, and that is the inputs and outputs of all the signal flow, even through the software chain. And so if I start there, then I don't lose them. But if I don't start there, then I end up with a baffled kid later on who just gets into a corner and can't get out. And so the programmability thing and the comment about having a real device, I think is really relevant, because if they don't get it, then they don't end up getting it later when it's in software.
You know, but you have to remember that even back then, a lot of people didn't get it. So it's true. There are a lot of synthesizer players who don't really understand synthesis that much. It's nice now that all these kids are on laptops learning synthesizers on any level. It's a great thing. It's one of the great parts about having software synthesizers. But it's not like everybody else understands the signal flow either. It's just they don't have to think about it as much.
Yes, ma'am.
I think for many of us in the room, it's a treat to see, the five of you talking and interacting. It's the ultimate nerd convention. There's a white elephant in the room I don't know if anybody's talked about, and that is, in this day and age, the new challenge we have, I think, is speed. And I don't mean slow, I mean fast. Each of you talked about limitations back then, and how those limitations forced you to be creative. And by working with less, you were inspired and your brain kicked in. And as a manufacturer, as a performer, as an audience, there was effort involved in it, in all of those things. We now have, regrettably, an abundance of stuff. And there is also the pressure, and each of you in all of your various disciplines, there is this pressure of, okay, the next new thing has to happen now. How did we get there? Why does it have to be so quick? Can we slow down just a little bit? How do we do that?
Ask your producer for more time.
Well, that's the whole point. Edmund was talking about that very same thing. I mean, some of us, I'll admit it, okay? The rest, I'll be the first one to say, I have started using presets. Come on, admit it. There's, legendary synth programmers here in the audience, and the deadlines are now, we're turning things around in hours instead of days, and we're doing it to please our client, because there's hundreds of us competing for that same client.
And they're getting spoiled.
And they're getting spoiled, and they don't know. Some gentleman talking about the kids not knowing. You've got clients that have no idea the miracles we're pulling off. Whether it's inside a Prophet or whether it's inside an Omnisphere, and the miracles we're able to do. But now we're asked to work even faster, and for me, it's beyond the point of comprehension. I want to get to know the 10,000 sounds in my Omnisphere. I want to get to know all these new plugins and stuff. And what operating system has Apple moved us to now? Oh yeah, there's the new thing. Is that a bad thing? Am I the only one that thinks that is a bad thing? How do we slow it down a little bit so that we can enjoy this process, both as as manufacturers, as artists, as an audience?
It's okay to stop. I find it's fine to say, okay, this 8-core 2008 Mac Pro is frozen now. I'm not going to do an update to it. What plugins are on it, I'm going to master and do the best I can. It takes, a friend of mine in France once said it takes 100 hours to master any synthesizer. 200 or 300 if it's the Prophet 12. Trust me on this. But it's okay to say, these are the tools I'm using. Because the important tool is me and the deadline. And, I have a show, I would love to come back here Sunday, but I've got a deadline Tuesday. And they expect miracles by then. And you do this on a weekly basis. It's okay to say, hey, you know what, that old Mac Mini that's just been doing the email server, I'm going to use it to put G Player on. And I'm going to get rid of my old Giga Studios.
Well, in our case, we're kind of lucky because we don't have to redo our product every time a new OS comes out or every time a new plugin comes out. We're still building, the Prophet 08 came out in 2007 and we're selling as many now as we did then. So we're not we don't feel the need to come out with something every year that's new and better, and then throw out whatever's out before. That's what the digital age did, I think, because everybody's workstation had to change. Okay, we need twice as many voices and more megabytes of this and more of this and more of that. And so every year the new M1, they're still building M1s, I think, just more voices and more sounds and better sounds. But it's the same product. But it depends on what you're doing. I just like coming out with something new and different when we're ready to do it, and then sell it for 10 years.
I think that,
and we don't have to change it. It still works the way it did when we released it.
I think that hunger for, what I was saying is the hunger for the immediacy and to get away from the insanity of the age we live in. That is one of the big appeals of hardware analog synths. It really is, and I think that's why I think it's great to have both, because it lets you take a break from the something that Tolga and I are always talking about is the hardware synths inspire us to use our software, and so that's why it's really useful to have hardware. We'll take a break and just use non-programmable analog synths and have a blast, and then that gets us pumped up to go back in and deal with everything. Yeah, and to have fun, but sometimes you can get trapped. You can get trapped when things are going so fast, and that gets in the way of your creativity.
I was just going to add too that I thought your question has most to do with human nature. I mean, who's running what? Just because the systems speed up. Somebody said to me recently, you know how the records used to sound so much better? That's because we had rewind time. You had time to think about what you played. You had time to rest your ears. We just don't have that time anymore. And I was agreeing. I was like, yes, rewind time. This whole random access is nonsense. And then I thought to myself later, I thought, wait, I could actually stop. We don't have to rewind in order to get the same thing. So in a sense, that's very true.
We are running out of time. I said 2 minutes, a minute ago, so one more minute, Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave. I'm a cartoonist in a musical expo. I draw the pack rat for Keyboard magazine, and these 5 guys here are the best R&D brains to pick right now for an idea for a script that I was coming up with while listening to you talk about how the unfun DAWs, are kind of like their work. And you enjoy the exercise and the strength that comes with certain analog instruments that do specific things. So what I'm thinking is, if these analog instruments are exercises in restraint, why do you make things with 30 oscillators and 15 filters and it's this giant thing? Because it seems to me that the only thing that's being constrained is your damn wallet. So what's going on in your heads as collectors, as scientists, that makes you want to take these minimal things and make giant stacks of them for limitless possibilities? Then now you're back to square one with a limitless possibility.
Sorry, we have to end now. Our cookies up here on the corner. Please help us out.
I had it right where I wanted it.